Okay, welcome. So today I wanted to offer some reflections about Harry and Meghan. Talking a little bit about the first episode, I'd also like to talk about Prince Harry's new book, called Spare, has just come out yesterday. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what Harry's boarding school experience was like and how that links into this Netflix TV show, Harry and Meghan. Okay. So, I have been watching over the past few weeks some of the Netflix TV show, Harry and Meghan. I've watched 4 episodes so far, and I've made quite a few notes of different things which really jumped out at me. I just wanted to talk a bit about the psychology, but also boarding school. What was his life like at boarding school? Now, I've not read Spare yet. It just came out yesterday. I will get a copy and read it and go into more depth. But obviously, to put it into context, my work, day-to-day work, is with ex-boarders. So every day I'm working with ex-boarders, men's circles, but one-to-one as well. And I've been fascinated by this area for the last 20 years. When I first read this book, The Making of Them by Nick Duffel, which is about boarding school syndrome, boarding school survivors. Now, I went to boarding school myself in the 80s and 90s, and the end of the 90s I had a rather major breakdown, and in reading that book I suddenly realized, it's to do with boarding school. So that's been my fascination about it since then. So the first thing which comes out, is, how similar Princess Diana is to Meghan Markle on one level by what Harry says. He says at one point that Meghan is similar to Mum, compassion, the warmth, and interestingly, in the book Contented Couples by Anne Power, who is an attachment theory couple relationship expert who I've interviewed on my podcast, she says when secure, she talks about secure attachment, but she's also saying basically, as well as being fascinated by what feels new and exotic, we are drawn towards the familiar. If our antenna picks up signs of both the fascinating and the familiar, we are quite likely to fall in love. The familiar might be a resemblance to a member of our family of origin, a parent or a sibling. So by Harry saying this, that he says that Meghan's similar to Mum, it's that familiar aspect that Anne Power is talking about, that what's drawn him to her. Other things from that, it just talks about the press, and I don't have necessarily, I won't focus on this today, but I think there's a real psychology here to why the British establishment seems to really hate Meghan Markle. I recorded a video a few weeks ago about Jeremy Clarkson and Meghan and his comments, and trying to understand why is it that the British establishment seems to hate Meghan so much. And I can definitely talk more depth of why I feel that is, because I think it's quite clear in my mind where this is coming from a psychological perspective. So, looking at that first episode, and linking it into boarding school a bit, that I see Meghan Markle, she's securely attached. Now, what that means, it's attachment theory, came from John Bowlby in the 30s, and it talks about this importance of having attachment with our parents. And I see that she's had, really loving mother, and then at the weekend she's with her father. Yes, the relationship with the father has broken down, but she's grown up being secure. Now, what secure means is that, if you've got a struggle, you can go back to your family, and I'll read out a few bits about secure attachment. So When parents are secure enough in themselves to be reliable, responsive, and accessible to their children, this gives children the assurance that they are lovable. Secure children have emotional balance, and they grow up able to love their families and form their own loving couple bonds. Now, as I've watched 4 episodes so far, I can really see that she has that secure attachment, Meghan Markle. You can see her on the TV show, that it's her who's kind of creating this family atmosphere with friends. She's the person who hugs. She brings a lot of warmth, a lot of love. And so for me, I see that I feel she's securely attached. Whereas Harry, on the other hand, I would say he's insecurely attached. What this means is that the bonds have been broken between him and his family at a young age, and that for me is boarding school. Joy Chavarin in this book talks about the rupture of when we go to boarding school, we're rupturing not only with our family, but also we don't see our homes. We're away for 9 months of the year. Prince Harry went to Ludgrove School from age 8 along with William, and then from age 13 they then went to Eton. So he was at prep school when his mother died, age 12. William was at Eton, so he was essentially alone. He does say that in the episode. It felt like he's just had, he says that in that first episode, loss of mum without support of anyone. And I see that, and I'll read another quotation from a paper that Anne Power did in Attachment Journal. She's saying, talking about boarding school, finally there will be some children sent off to board who have secure attachment patterns. So I would suggest that Harry is insecurely attached, but you can see that bond he has with his mother on that first episode. She's hugging him, she's really protective of him, very loving. So I feel he's securely attached with her, but less so with his father. And I would wonder, reading some of the reports of the Queen, she was very much hands off. She wouldn't even touch Charles or the children, left that to the nanny. So finally, there will be some children sent off to board who have secure attachment patterns. I hypothesize that the ratio of secure to insecure children in this group is already below the average, even prior to the damage that boarding will inflict on attachment patterns, because I believe that most parents who have themselves had the security that enabled them to raise a secure child would not willingly agree to send their child away at 7 or 8. To put that into perspective, some people just go, it's just tradition in this country. But if you could imagine a child 7 or 8, they're very small. You could imagine leaving them with someone you don't know for an afternoon. You'd be like, oh no, I'd want to know who they are. Well, often the parents will leave their children in a boarding school when often they might have met the head teacher, but not the staff. And they don't leave them from an afternoon, they leave them at that age for a week, and this breaks that attachment pattern. So what she then goes on to say is these secure children will be desperate to retain a belief in their loving parents, and they may resort to Fairbairn's moral defense. The only way the child can see the parents as good is to see the self as bad. No explanation will add up. But she does go on to say that people who have been securely attached are more likely to use therapy later in life. And I would say that Harry has used therapy. The other thing to point out in that first episode is that, so Meghan is securely attached, Harry is insecurely attached, but that can still work, that can bring healing to Harry. And you can see that, one of the examples, I think it might be later on, maybe episode 3 or 4, where Harry can see that she's depressed, but he keeps on, going off to these meetings, these galas, these things he has to attend, even though he can see he's struggling. And he says in one of those episodes that I could have done more. And I'd say that he starts to realize, right, I need to take a step back and really take care of her. Another experience I wanted to talk about a bit was, and this has just come out in his book, just in one of his interviews, that at boarding school, Prince William said to Harry, I don't want to speak to you. I don't want you to even say anything. The exact words were, pretend we don't know each other, he says. And Harry replies, yeah, and at the time it hurt. I couldn't make sense of it. And then William goes on to say, no. When we're at school, we don't know each other. Now, having worked with many ex-boarders and heard many stories, this is very common, that the younger sibling will be totally ignored if their brother or sister is on the year above. At my school, one of the boys on my year had an older sister in the year above. That would seem to be different. But for boys, often they would bully their younger brothers, or they just wouldn't even talk to them. So it can feel, quite bizarre. You have your home life where you might hang out with your brother, but then at school they totally ignore you, because this is one of the things at school, certainly the younger years, is you don't talk to the younger years. If you do, it's more to get them to do something, fagging. And this was certainly the case in my school. So I think that's mainly what I've kind of seen there about his, about that first episode, and about, what was boarding school like for him. It looks that Prince William really thrived at boarding school on one level. He was part of the Pop, which was like the popular boys at Eton, whereas Harry didn't get into that. It sounds like he struggled more at boarding school. And if you understand that, he felt very much alone, as he says there. What I feel is one of his saving graces, which is almost the connection that he had with Meghan, was in Lesotho, in Botswana, 2016, where they met. But in 2004, he went to Botswana I think he was 19, and he spent some time there. And the prince, I believe, whose tribe he's went to, they used to, they named him Mahati, warrior, and he says it's a place he was able to be himself. It was like, I feel personally that he got a lot of healing there, for the trauma of boarding school, of losing his mother. That's kind of really, I feel that brought a lot of healing for him. And the older prince out there in Lesotho was like an older brother, looked out for him. The prince had lost his mother, so there was that kin kind of connection. I really feel that. So there's also, in that episode, Mum, he talks about being harassed throughout life by the press, and it feels very similar to how Meghan is being treated by the press. And again, I feel there's a definite psychology to that. As one of the historians on that first episode says, is the royal family live in a gilded cage. Yeah. The currency is sharing secrets. So I think I'll just end there. Just some ideas. I will read his book, called again Spare, and I will, collate some more ideas. But I think it is fascinating that he's starting to speak up. I feel this is really important for us as ex-boarders to bring healing, is to speak of our journeys. If you've watched any of my videos about my boarding school experience, I found it very healing. And others have told me how healing they found it by listening to my shares of what was very traumatic. Some, losing a friend to suicide, sexual abuse. and by speaking up has been really healing. So yeah, I'm kind of really honouring Harry by speaking up. So yeah, I think that's it. So if you have any questions, if there are some areas I've spoken about you'd like a few more details, please do comment below. But yeah, I think it's a really fascinating topic, and yeah, I'll leave it there. Okay, take care.